Hello guys, this is me, Mr. Shangar. I am back again with a new lesson and a new subject. I hope you are all okay, and at the same time, I want to tell you that today's lesson is not easy actually. I'm sure most of you haven't heard it before. That's why you have to listen to me very carefully and closely. At the same time, I want to say sorry if my voice is not very clear today because I've got a sore throat and I'm not feeling very well. Actually, my health is not good. But what's important is that I'm trying my best, so please try your best to listen to me and to do all the exercises that I give you as homework because we don't have enough time actually, and the schools are open again. I'm sure we will have to speed up a little bit in order to finish the book. That's why what's required from you, you have to do it all. Now let's start today's lesson. Today's lesson is about passive, or you could say passive voice. Before talking about passive voice or how to make sentences passive, you have to know first what active sentence is. Active sentences are those sentences that you have formed before. In active sentences, we have the subject actually, and the subject is the doer of the verb. The subject is doing the action of the sentence. In other words, it's the subject that does an action. Actually, as you can see in these sentences, for example, the boy watched the stars. So the boy does the action of watching, and the stars, as I explained before in the previous lesson, is the object because the action of watching is being performed on the stars. Another example we have, my mom waters the flowers. My mom is the subject, and this sentence is active. Why? Because we have the subject, and the subject is the doer of the action of the verb. It's the subject that does an action, that's the action of watering. And the flowers is object. Why? Because the action of watering is being performed on the flowers. And I explained this in detail in the previous lesson. So in an active voice sentence, a subject does an action that affects the object. So before starting actually, before talking about passive voice sentences, you have to know what active sentence is. And as I explained now, active sentence is the sentence that we have a subject and the subject does the action of the sentence. Now you have to know why do we use active sentences or why do we use passive voice or passive sentences. First, we use active voice to say what the actor or subject does. So actor means the subject at the same time, the doer of the action. For example, we said my mom waters the flowers. So we know actually that that your mom is watering the flowers. So we have the doer of the action of the verb. So we focus on the person, the one who is doing an action. But in passive voice is used for what? To say what happens to the object. When actually we will cover it in the coming slides, you will know that in passive voice we focus on the object. We focus on what happens to the object rather than what the actor or the subject does. So the question is, you have all used active voice or active sentences before. Now the question is, when do we use the passive voice? We use the passive voice when the focus is on the action. As I said before, you focus on the object. You focus on what happens to the object rather than the subject. The subject, who or what's performing the action, is not important or even is not known. What I said, I'm sure most of you didn't understand it very well because it was all theory. Now we put the theory into practice, and I'm sure you will understand this example very well. First thing, look at this sentence, I write a story. As we talked about before, this is an active voice, an active sentence. Why? Because you have the subject and the subject is the doer of the action of the verb that's writing. So I am writing a story. I am the actor of the writing. Okay, so this is an active sentence. Now, how can I change this sentence into passive? First thing, the most important point actually is identifying the object. In the previous lesson actually, I talked about objects and identifying object in sentences in detail. Why did I do that? Because when it comes to making sentences passive, the first thing and the most important thing is identifying the object in the active sentence. So I is the subject, write is the verb, and what is being affected by writing, or the action of writing, is performed on what? Is performed on the story. So we know the story, or a story here, is the object. Okay, so once we identify the object, then you have to actually put it at the beginning of the passive sentence. Why? Because we said in passive sentences we focus on the object, not the subject. We focus on the object. We put emphasis on the object. So a story here is the object. Okay. A story, you know, it means one story, so it's singular. That's why we used is. Okay, we use verb to be in general, but here we used is. After that, in all passive sentences, that's true for all the tenses, we should use past participle form. And you are all familiar with this actually. We have to use past participle form of the verbs in all the passive sentences. In all the passive tenses, you have to use the past participle of the verbs. Okay, so a story is the object. We put it at the beginning. It's singular, we used is. And you know, I write a story, the tense of the sentence is present simple. So we used is. And we used the past participle of write, that's written. So a story is written. That's the passive sentence. Also, you can actually add, you call it by agent. I will explain this in detail later. You can also add by me. So look at the difference between these two sentences. The first one is an active sentence. Why? Because we have the subject, and the subject is the doer of the action of the verb. Okay. In the first one, the emphasis is on I, is on who is doing the action rather than the object. So we say I write a story, but when you make the sentence passive, we put emphasis on the object, on what is being affected actually by writing. That's the story. So the second sentence is passive. A story is written by me. Here the emphasis is on the object, is on the story. As you can see, we put the object, then it's singular. The tense of the active sentence actually is present. That's why the tense of the passive sentence must be the same. Be careful about this. And it's singular. We used is and always. We have to use the past participle form of the verbs in all the passive voice sentences. And you can add by me. So this is how we change sentences from active to passive. First thing, you have to identify the the object. Then you have to know the tense of the active sentence. You put the object at the beginning of the passive sentence. Then if it's singular, you use singular, actually auxiliary verb. If it's plural, you use a plural one. Then you change the form of the verb of the active sentence into past participle. Into past participle. That's how also you can use, or you can add by me at the end, or by the subject of the active sentence. This is how we make passive sentences. In this slide, I will explain more how to form passive voice. Look at these two examples. Someone cleans the streets every day. So someone is the subject, is the doer of the action of the verb. The sentence is active. Why? Because we have the subject, and the subject is the doer of the action of the verb. Okay, cleans is the verb, and what's being affected by the action of cleaning, or the action of cleaning is performed on what? Is performed on the streets. So the streets here is the object. Okay. Because it's the object, and I said before, when we make passive sentences, you have to put actually the object at the beginning of the passive voice or the passive sentence. So as you can see here, we put the streets at the beginning. The streets, okay. The streets is not singular, here is plural. And the tense of the sentence, of the active sentence, you know, is present simple. So you have to use are. You have to use are, and we change the form of the verb to past participle. So the streets are cleaned, and you add every day. It's the complement actually. You put it after the verb. So we have an active sentence. The tense is present simple, and we identify the object. So this is how we formed the passive sentence. Look at this box, actually verb change. You know, we said verb to be plus past participle, and this verb to be, you know, can be past or present simple, past simple. We have different tenses. Based on the tense, we use the auxiliary actually. Look at the second one. Columbus discovered America in 1492. So we have this man that he discovered America. Columbus is the subject of the verb. Sorry, is the subject of the sentence. And the sentence is active. Why? Because the subject is the doer of the action of the verb. The subject did something, that was discovering. Okay. Discovered what? What's being affected by the verb of discovering is America. And in 1492 actually, it's just an adverb with complement. It's not really important now. So America is the object of the sentence. So we put it at the beginning when we make the passive sentence. Okay, America. Here, America is the object. And here we look at the tense of the sentence. As you can see here, we have ed. So we know the tense of this sentence, the tense of the active sentence is past. That's why here we use an auxiliary that indicates past. And America is singular, so we didn't use where, we used was. Okay, we used was. And we changed the form of the verb into past participle. You know, all the regular verbs, they don't change actually, whether it's past simple or past participle. Here this verb is regular, is not actually irregular, and I'm sure you all know the difference between these two. So was discovered, as I said, you can add by agent, by Columbus. You see, we put the subject here. Why? Because we focus on the object in passive sentence, but in the active sentence here we focus on the subject. But in passive sentences we focus more on the object. America was discovered by Columbus in 1492. So the difference is now quite clear between the active sentence and passive sentences. In the active sentence, we focus on the subject, on the doer of the action of the sentence, but in passive sentences, we put emphasis on the object. Dear students, in this slide, I'm talking about the present simple passive. So I'm talking about one of the tenses of the passive voice. That's present simple. As I talked about before, how to make passive sentences, the first thing you have to do is putting the object at the beginning. So first we have the object. Then object must be followed by one of the auxiliaries. As you know, for present simple we have is or are. If the noun, if the object is singular, we use is. If it's plural, we use are. Then you have to use the past participle of the verbs. the past participle of the verbs of the active sentence. And you see, I put these two by agent into parentheses. Why? Because it's optional. For now, you can say it, and it's okay if you don't say it. But agent also means someone who did the action. Okay, let's have a look at these examples so you will understand better. People grow tea in Brazil. Okay, people grow tea. As you can see here, people is the subject. Why? Because it's the doer of the action, and the sentence is active. It's an active sentence. Grow is the verb, and tea, as you can see, that's in a different color, is the object. Is the object, and you know the reason. Actually, I don't need to say it all the time. So when you make a passive sentence, in Brazil is the complement. You can call it the complement now. We put tea at the beginning of the passive sentence. When we make a passive sentence, first we put the object. Okay. Tea. Tea, is singular. And the tense of the verb is present. Why? Because we have grow, and in present simple, when the noun is plural, we don't add anything to the verb. So the tense is present, and we identified the object. So first we put the object at the beginning. Second one, we have to know whether the object is singular or plural. If it's plural, we add is. So T is, then we changed, as you can see here, we changed the form of the verb to past participle. And the past participle of grow, that's an irregular verb, is grown. So T is grown in Brazil. So here you can say by people, and if you don't say it, it's optional. It's up to you actually. Okay, let's have a look at the, sorry guys, at another example. Children eat apples every day. Children eat apples every day. This is an active sentence. Why? Because you have the subject, and the subject is doing the action of the verb. Children is the subject, eat is the verb, and the action of eating is being performed on what? On every apple, of course, on apples. So apples is the object of the sentence. Every day you can call it the complement because it's the object. When I make a passive sentence here, I put it at the beginning. Apples. Okay, that's the object. So when I make the passive sentence, I put it at the beginning. Apples is the object. It's plural or singular? Of course, it's plural. And the tense of the sentence is present simple. So I have to use are. Apples are, and I change the form of the verb to past participle, are eaten every day. As you can see here, I didn't say by children. Also, you can say it's up to you. It's something optional for now. You can say apples are eaten by children every day. And if you don't say it, it's okay, because we use passive voice also sometimes when we don't know who the subject is or who did the action. Sometimes we use passive voice when we don't know the agent, we don't know who did the action. The last example, they show the news after my favorite TV show. So look at this sentence. They is the subject. They are doing something. Show is the verb, and the action of showing is being performed on the news. So the news is affected by the action of showing. That's why the news is the object. Okay. And what comes after it is complement. You don't need to worry about this. Once you actually found the object, that makes everything easy for you. So now we know the object is the news. Okay. Now, when we make the sentence passive, or when we passivize the active sentence, we put the object at the beginning, that's the news, and the news itself is a singular noun always. So we add is, and we change the form of the verb to past participle. The news is shown, and you put the complement after it. You could also say the news is shown here. You could say by them. You can add by agent. And if you don't say it, it's still okay. The news is shown after my TV show. Okay, dear student, now we talked about the present simple passive, one of the tenses of passive voice. I hope you all actually got it, and what's important now is that you have to see more examples. Now when you are reading stories, actually try to see if there are passive sentences and how these sentences have been formed. Now in this slide, I'm talking about the past simple passive. The past simple passive, one of the tenses of passive voice. I talked about it before actually when I was explaining how to make passive sentences, but now I'm explaining this in detail. Okay, like any other passive sentences, you have to put the object at the beginning, then followed by was or were, you know, the auxiliaries of the past, and then by past participle. As I said before, always you use past participle in passive sentences. Then actually, if you want to say who was the actually the subject of the active sentence or who did the action, you can add by agent. Okay, let's have a look at the sentence. Someone built this house in 1895. As you can see here, built, you know, is actually the past form of built. So you know the tense of the sentence is built. And you know this is an active sentence. Why? Because I have the subject, that's someone, and the subject is the doer of the action of building. So it's an active sentence. Okay. And you know this house is the object of the sentence. Why? Because the action of building is being performed on the house. And in 1819 is the complement. You don't care about that. Now, this house is the object. Okay, when you make the sentence passive, you put the object at the beginning of the passive sentence. So, this house. Okay, the tense is past, and so I have to use was or were because this house is one house and is singular, so I used was. This house was and built. You know, the past participle of built is built. It's the same as its past form. So this house was built in 1895. If you want to say who actually did the action, you could say this house was built by someone in 1895. It's all up to you. So we often prefer the passive when it's not so important who or what did the action. As I said before, when it's not important who did the action, because in passive sentences we focus on the object. We focus on what happens to the object, not on the subject. So in the passive sentence, if you want to say who did or what caused the action, use by. We call it by agent. If you want to say who did the action in the passive sentence, you can use by and the agent. Now we have more examples in the slide. As you can see, we have two sentences. One of them is active, and we change it into passive. The man ate the fish. Let's have a look at the first example. The man ate the fish. Okay, the man, you know, is the subject. Why? Because he is doing something. Okay, it's the doer of the action of eating. So it's the subject. Ate is the verb. And what's affected by eating is what? Is the fish. So we know the fish is the object. Okay, the sentence is active because we have the subject and the subject is doing something. Okay, when we change it to passive, first we identified actually the object, that's the fish. We put it at the beginning of the passive sentence here, the fish. Okay, you know the tense of the sentence is past. Why? Because we have ate, and ate is the past form of eat. So we have to use an auxiliary that indicates past. We have to use was here. Why? Because the fish is singular. Okay, the fish was. And we have to change the form of the verb of the active sentence in passive into what to past participle, and the past participle form of eat is eaten. So the fish was eaten. As I explained in the previous slide, you can add by agent, like you can add who did the action. You could say by the man, even if you don't say it is okay. But when you want to say it, you have to put it after the verb and you have to add by. The fish was eaten by the man. So this is the passive sentence of the active sentence, the man ate the fish. Look at this sentence, that's exactly the opposite. The fish ate the man. This time, the fish ate the man. So in this example, the fish is the subject. Why? Because the fish is doing the action of eating. And the man here is affected by the action of eating. So the man here is the object. Why? Because the action of eating is performed of the man. It's not the man who's eating, but it's the fish that's eating. It's the fish that's eating. So the fish is the subject. And what's being eaten here is the man. The action of eating is being performed on the man. That's why the man is the object. Because the man is the object, so we put it at the beginning here. We put it at the beginning. The man, okay. A man, you know, is singular and the tense is passive. Is past. Here we said the man was eaten. We change it to the past participle, and you add by agent, like when you want to say who did the action, you add by the fish. As you can see here, the passive sentence is the man was eaten by the fish. Here is totally different from the first sentence. So this is how we change sentences from active to passive in the past. You can see here, students, actually the difference between active sentence and passive sentences. In the previous slide, when I said the fish ate the man, the fish ate the man, here we focused on the fish. In the active sentence, usually, as I said, we focus on the subject, on who is doing the action. So here we focus on the fish. So in active sentence, we always focus on the subject. The fish ate the man. But in the passive sentence, the sentence is passive. The man here is the object, so we put it at the beginning. Here we focus on what? We focus on the man. The man was eaten by the fish. You see here we focus, we put emphasis on the object. Actually, in passive sentence, we always want to make the object important. We want to focus on the object. And that's why we make sentences passive, because we want to focus, we want to put emphasis on object. So the man was eaten by the fish. Here we have more examples. Actually, we have an active sentence that we passivize it, like we change it to passive. The ball hit Janet. You know, the ball is the subject. Hit, who was affected by the action of hitting was Janet. So Janet is what is the object. Okay, and the tense of this sentence is past. Why? Because hit is one of the regular verbs, and that doesn't change. Hit, you know, the past form and the past participle is the same. And how do we know it's past, not present? Because if it was present, then we must have added s here, because the ball is singular. But because we didn't add it, we know the tense of the sentence is past. So Janet is the subject, is the object here, sorry, because Janet was affected by the action of heating. So in the passive sentence here, we put it at the beginning. Janet, okay, you know that we said the tense of the sentence is past, and Janet is singular, so we used was hit. Hit is the past participle of the verb hit, it doesn't change. Or you could say Janet was hit by the ball. When you want to say what was caused or who did the action, what caused the action or who did the action, you can use by and the agent. The last example is this one. He wrote a letter. he wrote a letter. This is an active sentence because we have subject, that's he, and he is doing something, is the doer of the action, so we have an active sentence. Okay, he is the subject, wrote, you know, is the verb and is the past form of write, so you know the tense of the sentence is past. And what was affected by writing? The action of writing is performed on what? Is performed on a letter. So a letter here is the object of the sentence. So as I said before, the first thing you have to know is that you have to identify the object, then identify the tense of the sentence. But the most important one, you have to find the object in the active sentence. Then we can make the passive sentence. Now we identified it and we know it's a letter. So when we make the sentence passive, we put the object at the beginning, the letter. Okay, the letter is what is singular or plural is singular. And we said the tense of the verb is past, we know it because of wrote. Wrote is the past form of the verb write. The letter was, and we have to use the past participle of the verb wrote or write, that's written. So the letter was written. Now we don't want to say who did the action, but if you want to say, you could say the letter was written by him. You can add by and you can say the subject, you can say who did the action. So that was all about the past simple passive. Dear students, that was all for today, but you've got some homework to do. You've got page 80 to 84. They're all about the present simple passive, because I cannot give you 8 pages as homework. That's going to be too much for you. But in the coming lesson, I'll give you the remaining page as homework as well. Try to do them all because passive voice is something new to you guys. And if you have got any questions, please do let me know. Do not hesitate to contact me. And at the same time, try to watch or rewatch this video so that you will be able to understand the lesson very well. I hope you're okay. Take care. I love you all. I'm looking forward to seeing you as soon as possible, like I really hope, because I miss you all. Have a lovely time. Bye bye.